Consider tardive dyskinesia, a movement disorder entirely caused by psychotropic drugs. For 20 years, beginning in the 50s, psychiatrists failed to inform patients about the link between tardive dyskinesia and antipsychotics, such as thorazine and Haldol. By the time psychiatrists admitted the truth about their pills, thousands had been permanently crippled. Even today, tardive dyskinesia has developed in 73,000 older adults, and drug-induced Parkinsonism has appeared in 61,000 more. But this class of psychotropics is far from the exception. Reports are now surfacing that today's atypical antipsychotics and antidepressants, such as Zoloft, are causing widespread tardive dyskinesia, sometimes within months of first use. But psychiatrists and drug companies continue to dispute this damning new evidence and go on prescribing these drugs, even to children. But of all the side effects experienced by users of psychotropic drugs, the most horrendous may be an intense inner agitation and restlessness, known as akathisia.
These drugs can cause something called akathisia, which causes people to become very agitated, and actually a little nuts, a little off balance, and they'll do things that they never would have done before, things that are totally out of character.
This is a normal person without any history of auditory hallucinations, and all of a sudden they'll say there's voices telling them this is the only way to stop the pain, it's the only way is to kill themselves.
Had patients tell me that they never, ever, ever had one single thought about suicide in their entire life until they started on the drug.
An estimated 10 to 25% of SSRI antidepressant users, close to 7 million people in the U.S., experience akathisia. And Psychiatry's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders even admits the connection between psychotropic drugs, akathisia, and suicide. The statistics back this up. The suicide rate of the general population is less than 11 for every 100,000. But for every 100,000 people taking SSRIs, the suicide rate jumps to 718. Over 65 times more. And yet, we are told daily by psychiatrists and drug companies that psychotropic drugs actually prevent suicide. So, what are we to believe? One can start with the drug company's own warning letters to doctors, or unpublished data for the antidepressant Effexor, or an analysis of Prozac using the FDA's own statistics, or even a British House of Commons report on Zyprexa. Of course, not everyone commits suicide, but the huge volume of other side effects can be horrendous.
The medication that the psychiatrist prescribed me made me feel awful. Constant headaches, constant nausea, wanting my skin to turn inside out, just feeling like bugs were crawling all over me all the time.
It made me feel like all slow and like sluggish and stuff, like. And when somebody would ask me something, it would kind of like take a minute, like, what?
These drugs have affected my heart. They have affected my liver.
Weight gain one time, hit like 40 pounds.
These thoughts come over me like I wanted to kill I wanted to really hurt somebody.
It just sucks all the life out of you, so you're like a body, like a machine.
I didn't want to live. I didn't have the desire to live. I felt miserable.
You just can't live, you'd just rather die. Because there's no living when you're hallucinating every day.
I actually tried to commit suicide with my psych meds.
At some point when you realize that you are really just existing, you're not living, at some point you realize you need to take the risk to get off.
But what about those who say psychotropic drugs really did make them feel better? That for them, these are life-saving medications whose benefits exceed their risks. Are psychotropics actually safe and effective for them?
So what ends up happening is that someone feels good for a while, and then very often they have to have their dose increased, and then they feel good for a while, and then they might have to have it increased again, or maybe they'll switch agents. So it's that kind of a story if you're not actually getting to the root of what's going on.
I think the research is pretty clear that then all of a sudden starts to change, and you start to have a supersensitivity to being depressed, in which case then they become more depressed, and then they're chronically depressed.
And there is ample evidence that if the short-term side effects of psychotropics don't get you, the long-term effects will.
Psychiatric drugs are toxic to the body. they do build up in the body and add to the body's reserve and reservoir of toxins that will suppress the immune system, and the body will try and fight them as foreign objects.
If they're on these medications for years and years and years, I mean, one of the things that we know about adults and some of the, for bipolar and schizophrenia is that they're dying at younger ages.